Ninja Leaders Podcast, episode number 28.
Welcome to the Ninja Leaders Podcast, taking you and your student organization to the next level. And now, your host, Nick Palkowski.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Ninja Leaders Podcast. I am very excited today because we have a very special guest. His name is Jeff Goins. And Jeff, he is a writer, which is something he will proudly exclaim. And like he will tell you in this interview, that was actually a turning point in his life when he decided, hey, I'm a writer. I need to tell people that I'm a writer. I need to tell myself that I'm a writer. Jeff, he is the author of 2 books, Wrecked and In Between, and we're going to get into what each of those books is about a little bit later here in the interview. And we're also going to discuss how Jeff's journey and how it actually applies to you as a student leader. I think this is a great interview, and I strongly encourage you to, grab a pen and grab a paper and get ready to take a little bit of notes here, because Jeff does drop some excellent pieces of wisdom and some great action items for you to go out and change your life with. So here we go, our interview with Jeff Goins. Jeff, I want to thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the podcast.
Thank you, Nick. Great to be with you.
And Jeff, I already told our listeners a little bit about you. I've known you for a little while now. I've been a part of your tribe, of your community. We actually got a chance to meet about a year ago now. But I also wanted to give you a chance to just kind of introduce yourself. So if you would just tell our listeners in 60 seconds or so, who is Jeff Goins?
So my name is Jeff, and I'm a writer, and that's something that I say more for my benefit than for yours, because for many years I wouldn't own the fact that I was a writer. I would write, but I hadn't really adopted that title. And once I really stepped into what I think is my true identity, everything started to change for me. For years, I dreamed of being a writer, publishing books, and nothing really happened until I made this claim that I'm a writer. And so since then, I've quit my job and am a full-time writer, speaker, blogger, and I'm able to support myself and my family doing that. And I inspire other people to do the same.
And I just kind of want to dive into that a little bit. Why do you think it was so important, such a big shift for you to actually call yourself a writer?
Well, I think that activity always follows identity. And so what I mean by that is, if you want to lose weight and you think I'm a loser and I'm never going to lose this weight, chances are you're going to live into that expectation, and if you think that you're ugly and nobody wants to go on a date with you or something, you're going to project that in some ways. And I've seen that in lots of different aspects in my life. I've seen it in relationships. I've seen it in my vocation, my occupation, this idea that belief matters, that the things that you believe about yourself have a way of coming to life in your life. And so for me, it was really not so much saying something that I was not. It wasn't like, I'm an astronaut, now I'm going to go join NASA. It was me resisting being who I really was. And once I made that kind of scary decision to claim that I'm a writer, there was some responsibility that came along with that. I couldn't just say, this is just a hobby. I really had to start acting like a pro. And so I think that when you think a certain way, you tend to act that way. And likewise, if you don't think that way, the actions are really hard to follow.
Oh, and I think that's an excellent message for our listeners, and one that I'm excited to kind of explore a little more here in this interview as we talk about your journey and your latest book, The In Between. But I always like to start these podcasts out with a success quote. So Jeff, do you have a favorite success quote?
Yeah, so there's a proverb that says, "As a man thinketh, so he is," and that goes along with what I was just saying. I believe that our thoughts matter, and I think you can get kind of crazy with this and think that you can manifest all kinds of things out of nothing. I'm not so much interested in that as I am in who are you really, and why are you not believing that about yourself? In my case, I was just afraid. I like that proverb. It reminds me that whatever I'm thinking about myself, in some way, I am becoming that person.
And how did you actually go about applying this when you mentioned just calling yourself a writer? How do you actually put this into practice in your daily life?
Well, I mean, there are a few things that I did and that I continue to do. First was I had to really like physically do it. I had to say, okay, I am a writer. I had a conversation with a friend where he asked me what my dream was, and I said, I don't really know. And he said, well, I think your dream is to be a writer. And I said, oh yeah, I guess that's my dream. And he just looked at me and he had me cornered, and he was like, you don't have to want to be a writer. You are a writer. You just need to write. And so I literally started calling myself a writer. I started writing it down and, putting it in visible places that would remind me I am this thing that I hoped to be. And so I think that's the first thing is you have to really claim it. And then the second thing that I started doing is because I was making this claim and I was meeting people and they're saying, what do you do? And I wasn't telling them what my day job was. I was saying, well, I'm a writer. And obviously the next natural question is, well, what do what do you write? And I wasn't really writing anything. So the next part is you got to do it. And you got to keep getting better. And so on a daily practice for me, it's about reminding myself that I don't have to prove myself. I already am a writer. Now it's just a matter of doing it and getting better.
Awesome. So Jeff, you have two books out right now. You have The In-Between and Wrecked. And I've read both of them, and I'm part of your Tribe Writers community, and I've also been reading your blog pretty consistently for, a year and a half now. But I really want to dive into this latest book that you have, The In-Between. So what exactly is The In-Between?
So the in-between is this space in between all the moments in life. I think that we have this misguided idea about the way that we spend our lives, that we think life is made up of moments. And so we're constantly living for that next great achievement or big milestone. I know that I am, especially in my 20s. I was, and even in my teens, I was constantly seeking out opportunities to do amazing things so that I could have a great story to tell. But as I got older, those opportunities to do more and more quote unquote amazing things, seemed to, gradually disappear. And it wasn't that I wasn't trying. It was just that life was starting to slow down. And I had a choice. I could push back against that and try to do more amazing things that I could have great stories to tell, or I could find the beauty of the time that I was living in now. And so the in-between came out of this process of me slowing down and realizing that the best times in life are not the big moments. They're all of those little times in between. And those are the times that we're becoming who we are, where we're practicing the things that we want to do and be. And they're the times where we can be most grateful for what we have.
Oh, and I think this is such a perfect book for the audience that this podcast goes out to, because it reaches a lot of high school and college students. So, that's kind of the period where you're like, oh, I can't wait for graduation of high school so I can get to college. Oh, I can't wait to graduate college to get to the real world. So what suggestions do you have for people who may be in this kind of in-between period? How can they make the most of this waiting, or how can they really get the most out of the in-between?
Well, what I would say is embrace it, because life is one big wait. Don't think that it ends once you get to college or graduate or get that dream job. I mean, part of this realization for me came about when all of the things that I wanted to happen in life had come true. And I still wanted more. I still didn't feel done. And that's the point of life. You're never done until you're dead. And so what I have learned is that all of life is the in-between. We're always in between what just happened and the next thing. And if we're living for those moments, I mean, it's in some ways it's kind of like chasing thrills. It's like an addiction, and you're always trying to outdo the last one, and it can get really unhealthy. Whereas if we're living in the in-between, we're embracing those times. And when the big moments come, great. That's sort of like gravy on top, but it's not what we're holding out for. all of life becomes an adventure instead of waiting for those, great big milestones to come and go, which frankly can be kind of depressing.
Yeah, and you've definitely accomplished some really big milestones. Like you mentioned, you kind of made a lot of accomplishments that you had set out originally. Uh, I like to always go back kind of to the beginning to show our students, our listeners, kind of the journey, how people actually start. Because where you are, you are kind of almost on top of the mountain now compared to some of these high school and college students. They're kind of looking up, hoping to have your success someday. But what has been that journey kind of been like? Maybe could you describe one failure that you had along the way and how you kind of reacted to it and what you actually learned from it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so first of all, I just turned 30, and that always felt really old to me until I got there. And I still feel like in many ways I'm starting out. But really looking back on the past, 10, 12 years of adult life, um, at the time, what felt like accidents, what felt like inconveniences, I can now look back at and say, wow, like all of this had a purpose. There was a reason for all of this stuff to happen. And at the time, it kind of felt boring and mediocre. So that's an important lesson to learn, that the things that we're doing now that feel unremarkable end up being kind of the preparation or the prologue to our next amazing stories. But for me, really what my story is I went to college. I studied abroad. I had an amazing experience overseas, and so I figured I want to do this. I want to travel and help people for the rest of my life. So maybe I'll be like a missionary. And so I started going down that track, and then I ended up playing music with this band for a year, traveling around the country after I got out of college. Then I moved to Nashville, got married, started working for a nonprofit, eventually got involved in the marketing world. Like all this stuff started to feel really random. And as I was beginning to approach my 30s at 27, 28, I felt kind of lost. I had a good job, I had a good life, but it felt kind of safe and comfortable. And I felt like there was something more for me to do. And that's when I started thinking about this idea of a dream and started playing around with this idea of writing, which was really scary because I had been writing. I've been writing this blog for 4.5 years and nobody read it. And so I had already kind of failed as a writer, and I was about ready to give up when I had this conversation with a friend where I decided, okay, I'm going to start calling myself a writer. We'll see if that changes anything. And as I began to do that, things started to change. As I mentioned earlier, that the activity flowed from identity. And for a long time, I was trying to be a writer, but I wasn't fully committed to the process. I was doing what I think a lot of people do with a dream or an idea or some sort of passion, is they do it half-heartedly. I stopped doing it half-heartedly. I said, I am this thing, and now I'm going to commit to the work. I'm going to love it, and I'm going to work as hard as I need to do to get to where I want to be.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think that's really the key, is just committing to where you are now, committing to kind of the work, that everyday effort almost. And I think that's what allows people to kind of get to that next level.
Yeah, totally. And I learned that doing work that I didn't love. I was working for this nonprofit. I was in marketing, which I hadn't taken a single business or marketing class in college. I was a Spanish major. But this was what my boss needed. He needed somebody to lead this marketing team. And so I did it, and I tried to do it diligently. I learned how to commit to the process of becoming a writer by committing to something that I didn't really want to do at the time. And that's what I've learned your 20s in a lot of ways are made up of. They're made up of these less than perfect moments where you can decide to make the most of them or just waste them. And unfortunately, most people waste them. They're waiting for their opportunity to be awesome, not realizing that awesome is hidden in the everyday, ordinary, mundane moments.
And how do those people who are in their 20s, how can they actually go about making the most of some of those moments?
Well, so you mentioned this earlier, just kind of be where you are. There's a famous quote, wherever you are, be all there. So chances are, you might be in less than ideal circumstances vocationally or relationally or geographically. You might not be where you want to be. make the most of it, because in being all there, you are acquiring skills and disciplines that you will be able to use later on in life where maybe the circumstance is a little bit more ideal.
And you mentioned skills and disciplines. What are some of those maybe habits or disciplines that you've kind of picked up along the way that you think really have led to where you are now?
Well, I think that a common feeling that we have when we're chasing a dream or pursuing the kind of life that we want is I don't have enough time. I feel like I don't have enough time. Even today, I was looking at my schedule. I'm going, oh man, I am overbooked. I don't have enough time to do these things. The secret to getting things done isn't to have more time. It's to be better about using the time that you have. And so how I started a blog when I felt like I had no time to write was, first of all, I got up earlier than I normally got up. I got up an hour or two earlier before I normally get up. So I was getting up at 5 or 6 a.m. so that I could write during a time period that wasn't already scheduled. And most people weren't calling me at 5 o'clock in the morning trying to, get my attention. So it was a fairly undistracted time period. The other thing that I did, and I do this now because I don't always get up early with a young toddler in the house who sometimes gets up in the middle of the night. I try to grab as much sleep as I can, but I still find whatever time I have, I try to grab it and make the most of it. And so if I have 5 or 10 or 15 minutes to write or do something productive, I mean, those are little pieces of time that you can waste checking email or texting a friend or, whatever. Grab those handful of moments and use that time well to do something meaningful. And so I think that that's a secret to getting stuff done. If you're in a less than ideal circumstance, you don't have a great job, or you feel like you're just kind of waiting for your life to begin, find a way to do something now with whatever little bit of time that you have. And the cool thing is, if you do that every day, it adds up.
Oh yeah, that's a great tip and a great suggestion. So do you have any special way maybe that you capture your ideas, or how do you go about using the most of those little bits of time? How do you go about making sure you get somewhat meaningful work done during those little bits of time?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, tools are secondary to disciplines, but I do have, some great tools that help me make the most of those times. I've got two tools that I use, technology tools that I use. One is Evernote, which is a great, note-taking app where anywhere you are, you can take a note and it's going to sync with your, with your computer, with your phone, whatever. So if I've got, if I get struck with something and I'm, at a stoplight or at at a coffee shop or something, and I've got a few seconds to write something down, I just pull out my phone and I write that down, or a notebook if it's available. But I like, using the technology because it's all, it all gets synced. And then the other thing I do is I like making lists, and I use an app called Wunderlist, which is another free app that syncs with all of your devices. And when I don't know what to do, or I feel like I only have a few minutes, I go to my list of tasks and I say, okay, what's something that I can do, in these next 5 or 10 or whatever, however many minutes I have.
Oh yeah, those are both great, awesome tools that I use pretty regularly as well.
Cool.
So I want to jump back kind of to the book again. And
Yeah.
there's one quote in there that really just kind of stands out to me. It's the creation cannot come without sacrifice, even if it's just a mess in the kitchen. What does that exactly mean in this context? Can you explain it a little bit to our listeners?
Sure. So, I mean, that comes from the story of waiting for our son to be born. And again, the whole idea of the in-between is we're always in between. So learn how to use these moments, make the most of them, be grateful for the time that you have and the people that you have to spend it with. And so, creation only comes with sacrifice. I mean, my wife and I were learning as we were preparing to be parents that, part of our life together, was going to change. We were going to lose, the fact that it was just the two of us. It was now going to be the three of us, and we were going to have to make all kinds of sacrifices, much less the pain of and discomfort of pregnancy and childbirth. So I told that story while I was making pancakes for my wife one morning while she was pregnant, because I was just having a heck of a time, making the pancakes, finding the spatula. It was just a mess. I was just making a big mess in the kitchen. And this is, as a creative person, this is what I've learned about life and creativity as a whole, is it's messy. And then life is messy. If you're going to do interesting creative work, if your life is going to, not fit the status quo, it's going to be messy. It's going to be full of pain and sacrifice and hardship and discomfort. And all of that stuff is good. It helps you create something beautiful and maybe delicious.
Oh, and I think this applies even to maybe not your traditional creative kind of things. It applies just about any project. If you're starting something new, there's going to be a point where things aren't going to seem like they're going well. Things that might seem like there's too many obstacles, too many challenges, where it gets a little bit messy kind of there in the middle. But I think too often when we're working on projects, sometimes we can look around, be in the middle of that entire mess and get discouraged and not realize that, hey, the mess is natural. The product comes out the other end.
Yeah, yeah, and Anne Lamott talks about this, I think, in Bird by Bird, and basically the idea is that a messy house, a messy desk, these are signs of life. Like a messy kitchen means you just were moving around in there, messing with it, making something. These are signs of life and living. And when things are perfectly clean and sterile, it can be a sign of stagnancy, of inaction. I would rather have a messy desk that is a sign of activity than a clean one that's just a sign of sterility, of me not doing anything.
That's so good. So Jeff, how do you actually go about making sure that you take those actions? Because I do think that's something, especially when you're working on more creative projects or, being self-employed like you are now, it's so easy to kind of put things off, to not take that action. And I find that's something that our students sometimes struggle with, especially when they're first transitioning to, say, the college life, and now they have all this time on their hands to kind of self-direct themselves almost. How do you go about making sure that you take action and not procrastinate?
Well, I don't know, because I'm a terrible procrastinator. What I do know is that I'm basically worthless without a deadline. And so if I don't have a deadline for a project, I will arbitrarily create one. So making a list of things that I'd like to do someday is much less powerful than listing a few goals and assigning dates to them. So that, that's the first thing, is you got to have a deadline. I know it sounds simple, but most people don't do that with their goals. The second thing that I would do is have some sort of accountability. And everybody's a part of some community, and just having people that will check in with you or help you or encourage you through the process is so essential. I have friends who are asking me how my latest book is going. So, if I didn't write at all today, I'm going to have to face that. And I know that I'm going to have to face that. And so that creates some pressure for me to do what I need to do. And I only do the things that I need to do when I have to, unfortunately. So it's really about creating enough opportunities, enough have-tos that you actually get the work done. And then lastly, it's about habits. So it's not just about having goals and having community. It's about what small thing can I do today? I think most of us look at a big project, and we wait until the last minute to do it, at which point it seems unwieldy. And if we're learning, how we mentioned earlier, to use those small in-between times to just kind of, put a little drop in the bucket, do one small task associated with that project, and find a way to do that every day or as often as it necessitates, that creates momentum. And once you have a habit established, you can grow that habit. If you've gotten into the habit of writing 5 minutes a day, you can start doing it 10 minutes a day. Or if you're going to the gym, every day for 15 minutes, you can probably increase that to 30 minutes. Once there's momentum, it's easier to increase speed. And the same thing is true with big tasks and projects. You got to chunk it out and find small things that you can do every day and turn those into habits.
I found that momentum is by far my favorite word.
Yeah.
It's such a huge key to get anything done. I think it's essential to have in your life.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, it's really just finding ways to create confidence so that I'm not approaching something with, this spirit of, oh, I can't do this or I have so much to do. But I already have this kind of winning mindset where, because I have momentum, I have confidence, and I'm approaching the task in a way, in my mind, I've already won.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. So Jeff, I want to kind of switch gears a little bit here. You are someone who has built and grown a massive tribe in a relatively short amount of time. And all of our listeners here are leaders in their schools, in their student organizations, who are trying to get more members involved, get more people engaged in these organizations. So do you have any suggestions for them on how they can actually go about kind of creating a tribe of followers?
Yeah, so that word tribe is interesting. Seth Godin describes a tribe as in order to have a tribe, you have to have like a common cause or idea. You have to have people, and then you have to have a leader in some way to connect all of them. Some sort of communication method. And so it can be a blog, for somebody like me, or it might be something completely different. But I think before you can have any of that stuff, the leader needs to decide ahead of time what their goal is. And the goal should probably be something like, I want to help these people do X, or I want to empower or inspire, my classmates to do Y. But I think you need to decide ahead of time, what is the goal here? It's not just about getting a bunch of people together. I mean, if you've ever thrown a party and not really had anything on the agenda, like unless something just magically happens, it can be kind of awkward. If a bunch of people just get together and nobody knows what they're doing, that's awkward. So it's not just enough to bring people together. There has to be some sort of common cause, and a good leader will identify that cause. They'll find the pain point or need that they can serve, and then they'll find a way to bring all those people together, usually through some sort of communication medium. That can be a newsletter, it can be an event, it can be texting everybody, or it can be, Facebook or something. But if you really want to lead, you have to begin with that mindset of, I want to help these people, and I need to have a goal of what we're trying to accomplish with this community.
Oh, that's awesome. I think that's a key part of any organization, is to be able to really bring those people together and to really have that strong goal, to know exactly where you want to take everyone. How do you want to help them? I think that's an excellent key point. So Jeff, what is the next big thing on your horizon? What are some goals that maybe you have for this next year?
Yeah, it's ironic, Nick, because the tagline of the in between is embracing the tension between now and the next big thing. And so, in some ways, I wrote this book to sort of disabuse myself of the thirst for the next big thing. But on the other hand, I just can't help but continuing to look forward. So in that book, I wrote about the process that we shared here on this show, about how I became a writer, and how it was kind of this process of using whatever little moments I had along the way that added up into something big, and realizing, looking backward at my life, I already was who I was aspiring to be. Dreaming in some ways is about remembering, and so that process of becoming a writer was really about embracing who I already was. Anyway, that journey, as I've shared it, has resonated with people, lots of writers and entrepreneurs, and all kinds of people. So I'm really interested in this idea of vocation, of your life's work, not just a job, but the thing that you're meant to do, and how lots of different people step into that kind of work in different ways. So I'm working on a new book that's about calling, about this idea that you were born to do something specific, and it's not enough to just have a really great job and make a good salary. Although those things are fine, I think you were born to do something meaningful, to contribute something, and it's the task of your life to find that thing.
Oh, that's an excellent topic, and I am very excited to read that book when it finally comes out because I know it's something I definitely am passionate about, but it's something I also hear constantly from my high school and college student audiences that they're always looking to find what is their true calling, what are they meant to do. They're not just looking for that job to pay the bills. They're looking to have something that they're truly passionate about.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. And, just to give you a little teaser, I think one of the reasons why more people haven't found that is because the process to get there requires humility, it requires serving somebody else, and it requires what we've already been talking about, which is being where you are right now and making the most of that opportunity. I mean, I've read countless biographies of successful people, and all of them started in less than ideal circumstances and somehow used those as opportunities to move towards their dream, which gained clarity as they stepped forward.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. So, Jeff, I want to ask you my favorite question to always ask all of our guests is if you were to go back to high school or college, what is one thing that you wish you would have known?
Well, I wish I would have known that life would change. I thought that like when I was 18 or 19 or 20 or even 16 that I was supposed to have my life figured out and that my job was to stay the course. And in some ways, I think my 21-year-old self would look at my 30-year-old self and call him a sellout or something. And I don't feel like a sellout. I feel like I've just learned things and matured along the way. And so if I could go back to my younger self and give him one piece of advice, it would be ready to adapt and embrace wherever you are, because things are always going to change. But I always felt that pressure that I needed to have the answers, at the outset instead of being open to discovering them along the way.
Oh, that's awesome. Jeff, I want to thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the podcast. If our listeners want to find out more about you, maybe get your books, things like that, what is the best place for them to find you?
Well, thanks, Nick. It's been a pleasure. Best place to find me is on my blog, which is just goinswriter.com. Goins is spelled like coins, but with a G, Goins, writer.com. And you can go there, find out about my books, read my blog, and there's a free newsletter that you can sign up for if you want.
Awesome. And do you have any final words that you would like to share with our listeners? Maybe one last piece of advice for them?
There's this mantra that I kind of recite to myself when I'm feeling discouraged. And this was especially important, the past few years when I was chasing my dream. But it's still important now because chances are, somebody's doing something that you want to do. And it's easy to look at those friends or peers, acquaintances, and be jealous towards them and even kind of get embittered towards them. And this can happen in school and careers, whatever. And it's easy to see somebody else's success as a sign of your own failure. But I don't think that is beneficial at all. And so I realized that some people, man, they just seem to get lucky. And other people just seem to be really gifted, naturally gifted, and they can kind of be lazy. I can work twice as hard and not get the results that they have. So I created this mantra to remind me that if I persevered, I would still get to where I, wanted to be. I would still see the results. And so that saying is this: you can outlast those who are lucky and outwork those who are lazy. So some people might get lucky, that's okay, and some people might be lazy, and that's all right. If you stay the course, if you do the work, you're going to see the results, and that's true at every stage in life.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. So, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the podcast.
Thanks, Nick.
Activity follows identity. What area do you need to claim? Like Jeff, does it need to be, hey, I am a writer? Or like me, do you need to claim that you're a speaker? Or is it that you finally need to identify yourself as a leader? What is that area for you? It's something that you need to decide, something that you need to take some time and actually figure out what it is. And here's what I want you to do. For your take action item, go figure out what this area is, write it down, and then review it every single day. Review it every day for a month. just sit there and learn to claim this identity. Because like Jeff said, activity follows identity. I think if you do that, you're going to be well on your way to improving your life and really finding that identity, really living that out, living your dream. So go take action now. And that means it is time for our tip of the week. This week, our tip is actually an app called Habit List. And Habit List, what it does is actually keeps track of your habits. You can set a certain number of habits you want to try and improve every single day, or improve, habits you want to create in your life. And this app will actually, it will create reminders. It will do several other different things that we'll discuss here in a second. But this is a great app for you to, especially now here that we're coming into the new year, a lot of people like to make resolutions, create those New Year's resolutions, ways that they can actually improve themselves. But the only way to truly see your New Year's resolutions happen is to start creating habits in your life. And this is one app, one of many that will actually help you do that. This is by far my favorite. I've tested out several of them. But I really like this one. So what this really focuses on is helping you not break the streak. It kind of keeps tracks of streaks, how often you've done this habit in a row, and is around that whole mindset of don't break the chain. It's a famous Jerry Seinfeld quote, is that the best thing you can do is if you want to create a habit, is not to break the chain. Get all these check marks, all these little X's in a row, keep that chain going and going and going. That's what builds strong habits. So this app, what it does, it allows you to create a list of habits, however many you want to create. You can set reminders, you can change the frequency of habits. It gives you stats on the specific habits, also stats on the day, how many of the habits that you wanted to do that day that you actually completed. And for me, I have several in here right now. One of my habits is to drink 50 ounces of water a day. I have one to write at least 250 words a day. I have one to connect, one to exercise, one to reflect, several different things like that. Those are basically my habits. I think that's the full list there. I don't think I missed anything. Oh, another one was to reflect. But I strongly encourage you to go check out this habit. And if you want a link to this habit to actually get this app, just go to the show notes page for this episode, which can be found at nickpalkowski.com/028 for episode 28. And now, thank you again for joining me in this episode of the podcast. Before we go, I just have a couple quick announcements. Announcement number one, I just redesigned my speaking page, and I strongly encourage you to check it out. I designed it, made it easier for event planners to actually find the information they need. And so just go to nickpalkowski.com/speaking, and you will find a brand new speaking page. There's a little welcome video, and it kind of breaks down all of my presentations, the major topic, most requested topic areas. And each of those topic areas also breaks down to an additional page that goes in more detail on what you actually get with that presentation. So again, I encourage you to go check that out, nickpalkowski.com/speaking. Second announcement. Next week, there is actually going to be a little break from the podcast. We're not going to have an episode come out next week because it is Christmas time, and I'll actually be home all week with my parents and with my family, spending time with them. So I just wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we will be back on January 2nd with a brand new podcast on how you can use gratitude to lead. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the podcast. And until next time, go out and take action.
edition of the Ninja Leaders Podcast.